We've used butter in every single part of this recipe. It's really about drawing out the natural flavors of the food. Hi, I'm Chef Kajsa Alger, and I am the VP of Culinary for Veggie Grill Restaurants. Today I'm going to be making a potato and mushroom pierogi with smoked shoyu using Miyoko's European-style cultured vegan butter. So I'm starting to make the dough. I've got 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to take the Miyoko's butter. Very important that the butter stay cold until you're ready to use it. You don't have to measure this carefully. I cut off about 1/4 of the block of butter. Chop it into smaller pieces. That only makes it easier to work with. It doesn't have to be a specific size. And I'll drop that butter into the flour, separating it a little bit. Next, I'll take the Miyoko's cream cheese. I'm going to use this whole tub. Where the butter adds lightness and texture, the cream cheese adds richness and fat. So I'm just going to take a spoon and drop little pieces of it into the dough, the same way as the butter. The only reason you do this is to separate it a little and make it easier to mix together. I love Miyoko's products for this recipe. The butter has a very low water content, so it makes working with doughs really fantastic because you're not adding a bunch of water or grease into your doughs. A lot of vegan butters are actually margarines, which is just pure oil. What Miyoko's has is some of the nut milks in it, which gives it a whole different texture, and much like animal dairy butter. The cream cheese adds richness, and because they're cultured products, they have a little bit of natural tang to them, which really adds a depth of flavor. What I'm doing here is I'm taking the tines of a fork and I'm just lightly pressing the butter and the cream cheese in with the flour. You can see to create small pea-sized pieces of dough, much like a pie dough. At this point, I'm gonna add my salt. And I'm going to add the water just a little bit at a time, incorporating that with the fork. The reason I'm not using my hands the whole time here is because the warmth from your hands can actually start to melt that butter, and we want to keep that butter nice and cold. So while I'm mixing the majority of the water in, I'll be using the fork. And you want this dough to come together, but you still want it somewhat crumbly. You don't want it to be smooth. Once I add the last of my water, I'll give it one more good stir with the fork, and then I'll finish it with my hands, just kneading it a little bit. Like I said, it will not be totally smooth, and it'll have a little bit of dry crumble to it, but you just want it to come together in one piece. When we're talking about communal meals, bringing together friends and family, what's always so great is to be inclusive. And so I love to be able to do this dish vegan with all of these Miyoko's products because it allows for everybody to enjoy a dish. I'm going to place this in a plastic bag. I like to use the leftover bags from the grocery store. It's a great way of upcycling, but of course you can use plastic wrap or any other plastic that you have in your house to wrap this. So I'm going to place this in the fridge for about an hour. You can also do this the day before and leave it in overnight. So while our dough is chilling, I'm going to start the filling for the pierogi. First, we need to chop about 1.5 pounds of mushrooms. You don't have to be too careful with this. You just want small pieces. Today I'm using a mix of mushrooms, and I'm just cutting them across. I'm using shiitake mushrooms, which give a meatiness and a great flavor, depth of flavor. I'm using cremini mushrooms, which give us kind of bulk, and some other beach mushrooms that I found at the store just because I love them. You could use whatever mushrooms. You can also do this in a food processor if it's easier for you. Be sure to pulse it, not turn it on. Pierogi have lots of different fillings. Mushroom is a traditional one as well as potato, so I'm just mixing them together. There's all different sorts of pierogi though, and you can experiment with flavors as you like. And feel free to substitute the mushrooms for something else that you might have in your fridge. Cooking meals that could be served to many was a big part of my family. We have a very big family, and so pierogi and things like this were a great way of using up those leftovers and having the family together even after the holidays. Now that my mushrooms are cut, I'm going to cook the filling for our pierogi. So the first thing I want to do is get a large pan and turn the heat to medium high. You want to get this pretty hot before you start cooking. A good rule of thumb in cooking is hot pan, cold butter. That gets the butter nice and frothy, and it allows everything to come out of the butter, the oils and the fat. We'll see when we put it in the pan that it froths up. It gives us a nice flavor and texture, very similar to an animal dairy butter, but without the animal. So I'm going to add my butter. This is about 2 ounces of butter. And you can see it start to sizzle, and it's okay if it starts to brown a little like this. The browning is good. I'll add my garlic. You see all that froth? This is why I use this butter exclusively at home. Once the butter and garlic get going, I'm going to add my mushroom. This will stop the browning of the butter and start to cook the mushroom. I'll add a little bit of salt. We'll just cook that down for a few minutes until the mushrooms start to brown. We want the mushrooms to brown and soften. You'll get a smell of nuttiness and richness from the mushrooms and the butter. So what you're looking for is these mushrooms to get soft like this. They'll start to brown a little, and you'll get that wonderful earthy flavor. When the mushrooms are nice and soft like this is when I add the smoked shoyu. This is an ingredient. It's obviously optional. If you want to leave it out, you can, but I suggest you don't. The smokiness gives an umami that's really incredible, and of course fermented foods like soy sauces and tamaris and shoyus add a definite depth of flavor that you can't get without. Now that the liquid is mostly absorbed, I'm going to turn off my heat here. We're going to add this to 2 pounds cold potatoes. This is one of my favorite ways to use leftover mashed potatoes. Potatoes are cold already. It's going to make cooling down this filling a lot faster. But don't worry, because the mushrooms are hot too, so we have to cool down the whole thing. So what I'm doing here is mixing in the mushroom and the potato. All that butter, all that garlic. I wish you guys could smell this. It's amazing. Now that our filling is mixed, we're going to take this and chill it down in the refrigerator until it's ready to use. I've pulled our dough out of the refrigerator. I want to let you know that I did this about a half an hour ago because I think if it comes to temperature a little bit, it makes it easier to roll. To roll this out all at once might be quite a feat for your counter. So what I usually do is dust my counter, and then I'll cut the dough ball in half. This just gives us a little bit of a smaller piece to work with. So I'm just going to kind of rough shape this into a ball. And again, you could be generous with the flour here. All you want is for it not to stick. I'll also flour my rolling pin. I'm just going to press this. And now what I'm looking to do is roll this into about 1/8 of an inch thickness. We're going to be cutting out circle shapes, so it's not imperative that you have a perfect shape. We just want to roll it into a large enough shape to cut from. See, this dough is nice and relaxed. It's not shrinking back. That's because we rested it. If you find your dough shrinking back, you could just let it sit on the counter a little bit. This looks great. So now we're going to cut our circles. If you don't have a cutter, you can use something like the lid of a mason jar or a small bowl to cut your circles. You can also just cut a square or a triangle, something that folds in on itself. That will make a fine pierogi as well. So once I've got all my circles laid out, I'm just going to set them on a separate plate. So now that we've cut our dough, we are ready to make pierogi. This is so easy. I know everyone gets intimidated when we do dumplings and things like this that are handmade, but it's really such a simple process. So we're taking the round piece of dough that we just did. I'm going to put a little bit of water around the edge. All this does is help it stick because I'm not using any egg. I'll put a small spoonful of filling right in the middle there. And you can see all I'm going to do is I'm going to, with my index fingers, hold that down while I fold the dough in half. I'm just going to lightly press. All I'm doing is pinching that dough together. Then I'll take a fork and just run the tines along the edge. And what this will do will ensure that it does not fall apart when cooking. My mother is Chinese and we make a lot of dumplings in our house, and the process is the same no matter what country you're from. If you're making these little folded handheld things, often the technique is the same. Ravioli, pierogi, dumplings, pot stickers, they all come from the same techniques. So once you know how to make one, you know how to make all. So these pierogi are ready to go. I'm just gonna put them in the refrigerator until I'm ready to cook them. So now that we've got our pierogis made, they're ready to cook. I've got a pot of water on to boil, but before I put these in the water, I'm gonna get some onions caramelizing first. So I'm gonna turn my pan, again, to about a medium-high heat. Remember our rule, hot pan, cold butter. I'm just gonna add the butter in small amounts now. This is so that I can control how the onions are caramelizing. You can see this butter start to bubble. Just when the butter starts to froth like that and bubble, but before it browns, I'm going to add my onions. This butter is fantastic because it keeps the onions browning without adding moisture. So we're getting a lot of quick caramelization on the onions, which is the natural sugars coming out of the onions, hitting that hot butter, caramelizing in the butter without letting out water. Now about this time that I start to see the browning, I'm gonna turn down my heat a little bit because we're gonna cook the pierogi in the same pan and we don't want the pan too hot for the pierogi. If you're making for a lot of people and you have a lot of onions, you can make the onions first, take them out, and then cook the pierogi. But because we're just doing a small amount here, I'm going to keep the onions in the same pan so the pierogi cook in that caramelized onion butter. My onions are about halfway done now. This is when I add the pierogi to the water. Drop them in carefully. These take about 3 minutes. All I'm looking for is for them to float. These are looking pretty good. I'm going to move them all to one side. I'm just going to add a touch more butter to the right-hand side of the pan. Our pierogi are done. They're floating. I like the texture of boiled pierogi. So sautéing in butter is a traditional way of cooking these. I turn them as I cook, just to make sure I'm getting both sides. Remember, the pierogi are already cooked. We cooked them in the boiling water. So the dough is already cooked. All we're trying to do is give a little texture, a little crispiness on the outside, and softness on the inside. I'll mix in my onions now. This is starting to smell incredible. We've used butter in every single part of this recipe, yet it doesn't feel greasy, it doesn't feel heavy. You're getting that complexity of flavor and the richness. It's really about drawing out the natural flavors of the food. Our pierogi are ready. Look at these. I mean, when you think about being able to do all the components of this dish ahead of time, the actual finishing of it only takes a few minutes. And another one of my favorite holiday leftovers is cranberry sauce. So this is a perfect complement because we've got a really rich dish. So having something bright and a little bit tart balances out that richness and that earthiness. These are potato mushroom pierogi with smoked shoyu, caramelized onions, and cranberry sauce. That butter in that dough, but also you get that richness through the mushroom in the caramelized onions. That slight tang of the cultured butter is amazing. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the recipe and that it finds its way to your table this season.